Hello, hello. Welcome to Tea Time. Tuesdays at 2 o'clock. I am consistent, third week in a row. I'm out here in the beautiful pasture with my horses, and I thought today we would talk a little bit about non-negotiables. So this is a really interesting thing, seeing I teach freedom-based training and everything I do is about freedom. How is it that non-negotiables fit into there? Well, I really believe that freedom can't start until we have a baseline of safety. So if we feel safe enough in a relationship, then we can explore freedom. What choices does one partner want to make? What choices does another partner want to make? And with horses, this is my favorite part of training, is exploring the freedom between horse and human. But there are some non-negotiables in the relationship which have to do with safety. So this is an interesting thing because a lot of the people that come to me are coming straight out of a very dominant system where they're tired of the rules and they're tired of the regulations and they're tired of telling the horse what to do all the time. And that's fine, but we still have to have a baseline of safety. So for me, the baseline of safety is that horses need to move away from me when they're uncomfortable. So this is non-negotiable. And if I have a horse that will not move away from me when they're uncomfortable, I am going to make sure that I am close enough to a fence that I can duck outside the fence if I need to get away from them because I'm not comfortable. Obviously, if we're using a fence, this is no longer really freedom. So this is where the safety non-negotiable comes in. We need to feel safe enough to explore freedom. And that means that if there isn't that baseline that the horse will move away from me when they feel uncomfortable, we have to be careful we have the right tools to keep that safety barrier, that safety boundary. So a boundary isn't something the horse shouldn't cross necessarily. A boundary is something that we have to enforce in one way or another. So we could use a tool, we could use a whip, we could use a fence, we could use any number of things to enforce that boundary of we must be able to get some space between us if we feel uncomfortable. And after we have that baseline, that non-negotiable baseline, then we can go ahead and think about our freedom to make choices together, our freedom to play, our freedom to train. Yay, Kristen, I'm glad you made it live. Welcome. So this non-negotiable is obviously not about freedom, because what if the horse doesn't want to move away from you? Or what if the horse feels uncomfortable and they want to come towards you? That, in my opinion, is where we have a safety issue. Can we manage it and get out of the way in time? Yeah, we can manage it. But in my herd with my horses, that is a baseline non-negotiable, which means I am willing to scare them if I need to make sure they understand when they're uncomfortable, they should step away. I run into a lot of issues with students, particularly in clinics where horses are uncomfortable and they've been taught to crowd people. Then they've had some sort of a training method where trainers say you have to keep them out of your personal space for consistency. And I can see where that rule developed. I don't think we need a rule about keeping horses out of our personal space if we have a rule that they move away when they're uncomfortable. And that's where the consistency comes in. So this is something I enforce pretty well with my horses. Ideally, I'm going to go ahead and pass by them and be in a different place before they get uncomfortable so it doesn't even come up. But inevitably, I live in the real world. And living in the real world, sometimes we get in sticky situations. So if we get in a sticky situation and the horse feels uncomfortable and they start to come towards you, yeah, sure, you can pass them, you can move around them, but I also think that this is an opportunity to consider less freedom and a little bit more dominance. It might be worthwhile sending them away to get that baseline non-negotiable place of safety. If you're uncomfortable, step away from me. Horses are really, really big animals. And so we really need them to step away from us when they're uncomfortable. This is also going to be true if you're riding. If you're riding and your horse gets uncomfortable, you want them to move smoothly forward. You don't want them to be bucking, kicking, throwing themselves up into the weight of the rider. You want them to just move away from whatever that uncomfortable feeling is. Obviously, I do most of my work not riding. I'm much more about all the other things that we can do together. Riding is just one of many fabulous things we can do together. But throughout all of the work I do with horses, I find if we take a shortcut and we say, well, you know, my horse is pretty nice. He doesn't move away from me when he's uncomfortable, but it's all right. We manage it. That's something everybody gets to decide for themselves. So if you're in a relationship with a horse that really crowds you, steps on your feet, knocks you over, things like that, and you're just managing it, I would encourage you to consider this baseline of safety. Freedom of choice comes after safety, not before. And I don't think that means you necessarily both have to feel safe. You just have to be safe. So when I get a wild Mustang, obviously they don't feel safe yet, and I don't know them well enough to feel safe either, but we can be in a big enough space where we both have room to move away from each other. And if they're right up against the fence, I'm not going to push them because they no longer have any space to step away from me. Again, this is where I see a lot of problems that come up where people keep pushing on a horse when it has no more room to move away. That's when they're going to rebound into other behaviors of coming towards you when they're uncomfortable. And that can create a lot of problems down the line. So, see, I have a comment. Christian says, you can let horses get close to you if you're able to send them away if you want to. Jenny Wild. Yep, absolutely. Closeness is beautiful. I love closeness. We just need to make sure everybody understands if you get uncomfortable, there has to be a little bit of space. They're just too big. Christian says, I'm okay with my pony scratching himself on me if he does it gentle, and then I can help him with the itch. Exactly. So freedom starts after we have a baseline of safety. And if you both feel good together, then yeah, you can be as close as you want for as long as you want. But you have to start attuning to each other's feelings. If it gets uncomfortable, there has to become some space between you. Now, the question that comes out of this is when we're riding, obviously we don't want space between us. What if my horse gets uncomfortable when I'm riding him? I don't want any space between him. You don't necessarily want to have to get off or feel like you're going to get bucked off, but you do want to feel like you and your horse are trying to move to another place that is more comfortable. And I'm not a big believer in making horses stand still because I find that that's very, very difficult. When you force them to stand still, that's when you get a lot of more of the pushing, bucking, leaping, rearing behaviors. I would much rather have a horse move forward trying to find comfort than a horse back up uncontrollably. So this idea that you just move forward trying to find comfort is going to go into your ridden work as well. You've got lots to say here. One's got a lot of space when riding. Well, I didn't listen carefully enough to the horse. My fault. Yeah. So obviously we don't want to fall off when we're riding. We want to get off on purpose. But just starting with this idea of safety, that I can get off and give myself some space if I feel unsafe. My horse knows how to step forward, move forward into a better place to find comfort for themselves. All of that as a baseline of safety means that then we make a habit of training when everybody feels safe. So I have been going out for a lot of hikes with my horse Ocasio. It's springtime, there's lots of grass, he's eating a lot, so we've been doing a little extra exercising. And we went out for, I think, 3.5, 4 hours the other day and had a great hike. It was so much fun. But one of the really most important things when we're out on these hikes is that when I put pressure on him, he moves. This is not negotiable. I do a ton of training that is negotiable. When I work in the pasture, we can negotiate all day long about how we do things, how it's comfortable, how we work together. But once I put the halter on and we're out in spaces which are potentially less safe, the being able to move away from pressure is really, really important. So if your horse doesn't know how to yield yet, if they don't know how to move gracefully away from pressure, then that's fine. Stay home. Stay home where everybody is safe enough that that isn't needed per se. And I have no problem with staying home. Home is beautiful. Once we start going out in the bigger world where there's cars and bicycles and traffic and all sorts of unknown, unsafe things, if I ask my horse to turn left or turn right, it needs to be a habitual practice. That's not negotiable. And I need to make sure that we practice that before there is danger. So before there's a hole he could fall in, before there's a car that could hit him, we need to make sure that when I say turn left, he turns left. If that is negotiable and he's not sure he wants to turn left when I say turn left, we've probably gone too far from home. We need to stay in environments where it's safe to have negotiations. Once we get to the point where we've built enough good associations with turning left or turning right, it starts to become a habit. And when it's a habit, it just happens naturally. We don't have to think about whether it's negotiable or not because it's just such a strong habit at that point. And that's the way I like to train. I like to train with freedom so that something becomes such a strong habit. We don't have to think about, does the horse want to respond or not? Of course they want to respond. They have 1,000 other experiences of turning left and having it go well. So when I ask them to turn left because there's a hole underneath their feet and they need to avoid the hole, they're not going to question me because we have so many previous good associations with turning left. Yeah. So that Christian says, I remember your first trailer loading with Atlas. It's also a border somehow. I don't know. I would have to ask you more questions about that, Christian. I'm not really sure what part you're remembering. But anytime we are starting to leave home, which is definitely going to be when you start putting your horse in a trailer, there needs to be a point where we say, my pressure isn't a negotiable thing because we're going to head into danger. And we need to make sure that we have a habit, a strong, positive habit about you responding to pressure the way I ask before we're in a dangerous situation. And so, yes, exactly, Christian. Safe environment first. Then we start working in environments where there's more distractions, and then eventually we can be in unsafe situations. We build that up very incrementally. Now, the beauty of tools. So when people use bits and when people use food rewards and when people use whips, you can progress faster. Your non-negotiables get a lot easier to reinforce. And that's the beauty of tools. I like to work without tools. And so if I work without tools, I need thousands more repetitions of a positive association with a left turn, a right turn, a backup, a go forward. All of those things so that that strong positive association becomes the accountability for the horse. I know that I can depend on them without having the types of tools that I might need to make it a non-negotiable. So Christian says, the long waiting part, he went inside by himself. You were just closing once he got ready. Yeah. So once I start loading a horse in a trailer, we may take a long time to get in, but it's sometimes non-negotiable about where they look, as in I want them to look in the trailer until they're ready to get in the trailer. Now it's my job to be wise and say that's enough before we get in a big argument about it. So that's the biggest thing about building positive associations, is the wisdom to know when to end when the associations are still good. So if you're trailer loading, if you're going somewhere the horse doesn't want to go, if you are any number of things, these are all built on yields. Can you go left? Can you go right? Can you go forward? Can you go backwards? And these need to be non-negotiable if you're in a safety situation. We need to practice the non-negotiability before we get in a safety situation. Or if you don't want to use the tools and make them non-negotiable, you need thousands and thousands and thousands of repetition with positive associations. And those positive associations could be things like food rewards, but the thing with food rewards is you can withhold them. So because you can withhold them, you get both the positive and the negative. I like to use positive associations from naturally occurring sensory experiences within the horse. So when they use their eyes and they like what they see, when they use their ears and they like what they hear, when they use their sense of feeling and they like what they feel, not because I delivered it, just because they found that feeling all by themselves. When we link those to a left turn or a right turn or forward or backward, when we do it thousands of times, we've now built good associations to the point where we can count on the forward, the backwards, the left, and the right. And so that's something I've been thinking about a lot this week as I've been out hiking with Ocasio and following the trails. And for the most part, I don't need a halter on him anymore. We put a little string around the base of his neck, and that's enough that I feel like even in a dangerous situation, I could get his attention because we have so many positive associations now. The non-negotiables don't have to be so heavily enforced when you replace them with positive associations. So I hope that's inspiration for all of you guys. Whether you're working with a horse that's in the beginning of their journey and you need to really keep them safe, that's valid. Or whether you're a little farther along in the journey and you can start replacing your non-negotiables with positive associations. So hopefully that's good inspiration. Thank you guys for joining me for tea time. And I will be back next Tuesday, 2 o'clock Pacific time.